Welcome to the Kuyperian Commentary Podcast. This is episode 128. We've been on hiatus for a couple of weeks. If you hear a little scratch in my throat, it's because I'm coming off of a cold, but that's okay because I'm hoping that our guest today can do a lot of talking and I won't have to say much at all. We're talking about the faith and beauty today on the Kuyperian Commentary Podcast. I have Magnus here from Norway who's going to talk to us. Magnus, I haven't asked you how to pronounce your last name, and I don't want to try. So can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. It's in Norwegian Gautestad, but for the rest of the world, it's Gautestad.
Gautestad. Okay, I can pronounce that. That works.
Yeah.
So Magnus is a composer from Norway. He's an entrepreneur. He's got a passion to see the revival of beauty in Western arts and church life. And he's got some plans for how he wants to implement that. I want to talk to him a little bit about that today. This is interesting for me because one of the classes that I teach online is a senior thesis class where high school seniors can pick any topic they want in relation to the modern world and then try to do research and present a 30-page thesis at the end of the year and have it defended. So it's a pretty big process for them. But one thing I've noticed several times over the last few years, and it seems to be a growing number of people, want to write thesis papers about architecture and the ugliness of the modern world and how I think there's a growing sense, especially among young people, that the world isn't as pretty as it used to be. Things are really ugly, and not just pretty. That kind of downplays it. There's no beauty. So can you talk to us a little bit, Magnus, about where you're coming from as far as that topic goes, how you came to the positions you're at? What made you decide that you want to help promote beauty in the church?
Right. That's a really great question. And I think this can really strengthen the motivation for why this really matters. Because, of course, it matters to help the poor. Of course, it matters to share the gospel. Of course, all of these things are really, really important with the resources and time we have. So why spend time on beauty? Is this really worth it? Well, I would say that if we are going to be reaching all people with the gospel, if we're going to be discipling all the nations, there needs to be a holistic approach to how we share the gospel. And I think historically that is what we have been doing. We have been sharing God's love and the truth through good works, through beauty, and also, and truth. We have the truth, goodness, and beauty. And I think as soon as we value these and understand that if we take away from one of these, then we also take away from the two others. Then we come to a church which actually equip everybody in the church to serve, and also are able to really resonate with all of the people. So for me, classical architecture, making classical music, things like that was the last thing I think I wanted to do when I grew up. If you met me when I was 15, I was the drunkest guy at the party with a tight Ramones t-shirt. Had no faith in God, just a sponsored skateboarder playing in metal bands in Norway. And then I came into this type of crisis in my early 20s, where life just started to feel really meaningless. I was starting to get a bit into drugs as well there, and it's just that type of emptiness of, I guess, the flatness of the modern world was just like, is this really all there is to life? That was the realization I started to have. And then I just took many months in solitude, and just I got to figure out, who really I am, why am I here, and all of these questions. And so I started down another rabbit hole. So instead of just, hedonism or just for pleasure, now it was success. And then I started a music school in Norway, and I did all of these things. And then I still like, is this all there is to life? But then I went to United States to do a degree in music. So I went to I started my degree, and I had a class called musical appreciation. And in there, Rick, I started to learn about the Western history, and I started to train my ear. So through education, suddenly, even I've been playing in bands for 10 years, right? And through education, it was like I stepped into another, like almost another dimension that I haven't really taken in before. And that was what I would say was beautiful. The truly beautiful and it was so powerful. So now I didn't need to listen to black metal anymore because Bach was much more powerful. That was the next level in power. That was like, whoa. So what happens that after I trained my ear with music, I went out the door, and suddenly I realized all this beauty that was around me that previously I didn't see before. And so when I started noticing these things, when I looked at women, I started to like those with less makeup and those that were more elegant instead of those who were like, a hot piece, and then I started to look at myself, and I was thinking, you know what? I want to be kind of like a gentleman now. That's much more badass than just them being like this bad guy. I had at this time I had long blonde hair, and I was like a mix between a rocker and a Viking or something like that. And that's fine, but that was what happened when I just let go and kind of just was bold and just took what I want from this individualistic mindset of an overachiever and all of that. So what happened is that I came back to Norway, and then I wanted to get in contact more with this beauty. That started to make some sort of sense of purpose and meaning and order in the world. And whenever I got in contact with that beauty through music, through architecture, to arts, it was like I was seeing into something that was almost like something came through that beauty. It was like I couldn't contain it in the beauty. So whenever I experienced that type of beauty, it transcended my reality, like nothing else had. Like marijuana or success or any type of other experiences didn't give me that rest. And I think about a lot this quote from Augustine that, "Oh Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until we rest in you." And I think absolutely, and C.S. Lewis would also confirm this, that beauty really true beauty really comes through into us, into these elements, and are not contained in the elements. And I think realizing that is also the way we can use more beauty without falling into idolatry, because I think the Bible confirms the beauty, but it protects us against the seductiveness of it. So what happened when I came back to Norway? Well, I went to the concert house. I went to the modern, to the art galleries, but I didn't really find the beautiful there. I find a lot of things that actually made me depressed, or actually just got even worse sense of chaos. And I thought the artist was those who going to give us meaning and direction and everything. So where did I go? I went to the local Lutheran church down the street, which was always been there, but I hear the church bell one day, and I go, and that's where I then threw all the Bach pieces and the hymns and the psalms, and sitting in this beautiful room and just contemplating this window into the divine, or whatever you can call it. That's when I heard the gospel, and that is when I came to Christ and repented of my sins and accepted him as my Lord and Savior. And I'm just thinking, Eric, how many others there are like me who had Christian neighbors but never truly touched by their good work, that had the truths been spoken many times. I played in one of the bands I played with was a Christian metal band. I was the only one that was an unbeliever. I kept hearing preaching again and again, but it was through beauty that the Lord, through the common grace, that the Lord actually drew me toward himself. And that's why I think this is very, very important, because the artists are huge influencers in our culture. And if we're going to take dominion in culture, if we're going to be ushering in the kingdom of God for his glory, then we need to be prioritizing the arts and the artists.
Right. I mean, Magnus, I'm even thinking about C.S. Lewis in the book, The Abolition of Man is where he talks about it, where he's talking about in our modern world, someone looks at a waterfall and says, that's sublime. And the interpretation that we're supposed to have in the modern world is that says something about the feelings I get when I look at that waterfall, right? I get sublime feelings, but there's nothing about the waterfall itself that makes it beautiful or sublime. It's just how I feel about it, which creates a world like we have today, where everything is subjective. There is no true beauty, and everyone just finds what they enjoy. But I think, it sounds like what you realized is what's happened is there's been really a downgrade in beauty itself. You know, there was a time when you had Bach and you had Handel and you had Thomas Tallis, you had these great composers, and they were building on each other and developing, not all the same style, but developing in that tradition. And at some point it was cut off. There was a division. And what we have today isn't really developments from that. When you listen to, death metal or things like that, it's not, I know a lot of metal artists like to include classical riffs in their music, but it's not really a true development. It's meant just to play straight to the emotions. Whereas when you're looking at true beauty, you're seeing something outside of yourself, something transcendental that's not inside of you, it's outside of you that you're being drawn to. And it sounds like that's what you're saying happened to you, and what maybe you're saying is missing in a lot of the Christian world today.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
it is, and I think also that's also where soteriology becomes so important, because if we're thinking that God drawing is mainly through teaching, and of course it is, a big part is that, but when we're thinking that there is sort of a miraculous, or there's an element of mystery of how God calls, how he draws, right? And when you have that focus, you can think about a little bit more of, I would call it pre-conversion experiences. And I think in a postmodern society that we have now, that are so hostile to goodness, to moral goodness, and to objective truth, I think there is an amazing opportunity right now to beauty, to start with beauty, because that is actually a place where we can come together. And I have events. I'm going to have an event in June in Norway now called Together for Beauty, bring together Christians and classical, great painters, glaze composers. We all come together, people from different churches, together for beauty. And it's just a wonderful thing to start off with. And then, people start asking questions, and then it's very easy to lead into some other things. So I think it's very, very important. But how do we actually do it in a sustainable way? That's what I've been thinking lately. And that's where we also need to come together with more creatives and the entrepreneurs and the investors.
That's the question I was going to ask you, and just about your plan and your goals, where you want to go with your ideas is, let's say you have a church plant. It's small. It's doesn't have a lot of money because it doesn't have a lot of people. And so they might be able to afford to pay their pastor a part-time salary while he works another job on the side, and they're renting a space in a strip mall. They have a little store space where they have church. How can a group like that pursue beauty in their church and in their worship?
That is something I've been praying and reflecting a lot about. And if we see how the development of churches in urban areas has developed, especially since the COVID, and the numbers of how many churches are actually closing right now, we can't just sit still right now and just do things like we've always done it. But I actually think that this is a great opportunity because in terms of evangelism, we have never been in a space with more opportunity. So if we're starting to think more about leading with community, and that is why I'm so attracted to CREC, because they understand the need for community in a society now that has done such a job of separating and isolating people. So what we need, and something that will never get off fashion, is community-centric areas in physical space. And the church should be a place like that, where the community comes together. And the wonderful thing is that in the church, you have a lot of people who are who have this depth that so many now want. They start to understand the superficiality of a lot of the arts, a lot of the woke movies. You have the ugly modernistic art. You have all of these things. And it's not the general person in society, in Western society now, is like, 75% of people prefer classical architecture. And in many places right now, it's like 95% of things they are building is these shoeboxes. So
Right.
there's also a democratic problem happening. And so So I think that the church should be the one now leading that revival of beauty, of excellence in the art, of having a meaning. So how can we do this? Well, we are starting a company now called Beauty and the Faith. It's a holding company, which is it's structured like a real estate company where we bring together synergistic opportunities where we are saving historical buildings, and then we're putting a lot of different businesses in the same building. So, for example, if you know how many of the biggest cinema chains in the world right now that are struggling after COVID and I want to sell, we can buy some of these, the ones that have been in the community for maybe 100 years. You save that building, which has historical value and has a special place in heart for many people there. You can save jobs. You can diversify what we have in there. So you can have cinema, you can have music school, you can have art gallery, you can have library, you can have some of these online Christian schools or online classical philosophical schools can then actually get they can actually afford to teach also in physical space. And that's, a lot of these craft actually need hands-on experience. And of course, in these spaces, churches can rent, so they don't have to manage all the things that goes along with having a complex space, because that's a big problem. There's books, I think there was a book I read called Escaping the Church Inc. That was the name of the book. Because I'm really for that pastors can actually be pastors and don't become this big business owner that uses so much time of administrative tasks. But in the churches and in the larger body of Christ, there's a lot of really talented business people, entrepreneurs, and investors who loves to manage these things. And quite frankly, does it a lot better job than pastors does, because we have different callings, right? So if we then could manage these places, Rick, most church real estate uses their space 5% of the time, and the church is the biggest real estate holder in the world. Can you imagine if we are able to triple or use 5 times as much of that real estate space, what that would do to sustainability, to financial growth, to engagement in culture, to helping more people, to excel in the arts, right? So if you're in a place like that and you already, the youth in the church, they're at the coolest center in the whole town. They got all of these great things in this really, really badass building, and which never goes out of fashion. So it's actually sustainable also, and it actually talks to the stewardship of the environment and everything that people care about, without becoming this type of leftist propaganda doing it, right? So it just hits on so many buttons, this project. And we're right now bringing together lots of different people, organizations that are looking into this. And especially I've been speaking with, people in the Series C, because I think that you teach the whole counsel of God, and you have a type of ministry that are focusing on engaging all the areas of society and the kingdom of God. And I think that is a key, that we need to step out of this type of escapist, excuse me if I'm saying it, but dispensational bubble,
Right.
and start to actually be the ones that are getting into the driver's seat in culture.
So as far as how your vision for the arts and culture, that would give spaces for churches. It sounds like a great idea. What are you envisioning as far as Christian engagement in the arts and entertainment? Obviously, music is big because we sing in church, and already I think one of the very first things the church can do to increase its beauty is stop singing the terrible contemporary music and start singing hymns. And instantly, even without any architectural changes, you've increased the beauty of your service. But beyond that, you talk about the church and entertainment. You talk about running cinemas. Do you have a vision for Christians in cinema or Christians in the entertainment world?
Absolutely. The wonderful thing is, as soon as I was speaking about this, we're also developing actually a cinema business, but we try to rent, to give lease, to be a leaser for different businesses in the local community where we can, but where we can't find it, we're also developing some of this system ourselves. But as soon as I start talking with this in some of the investor network that I'm in, they say, hey, I got this believer in Hollywood, and and suddenly you start to get different connections. And is it one reputation we are committed to remove? That is that Christians are making cheap movies. That's the last. We are the last people that should be making cheap movies. So when we are developing these centers and this brand, that also means that whenever there's new movies with moral alternatives, just like you have, is starting to pop up now, right? Different streaming platforms, you have from Angel Studios and different, there's alternatives, because people are just understanding that this wokeness, so many times you watch Netflix and it's like, and then there come that, that was that message, and there was this, there was that, and then I just feel bad and I turn it off, and kind of like the date night with my wife, which like so so we really want to go in there. Some people say, get out of Hollywood. I say, Christians, we need more Christians in Hollywood. We need more Christians in local churches composing music. This Hillsong, Bethel music type of big money industry thing. It's a big Goliath, but we can, that can definitely be transformed. So much of the great music through history was made by local churches where they actually took their artists seriously and actually encouraged them and supported them. And I believe very much in adding more knowledge and education for composers, because if more people can compose, they can also arrange. So that means that you can take pretty simple pieces, if it's a hymn, because there's also some churches that only uses hymns that was written 100 years ago and never do anything with that. And there's a sense of potential also in those churches to get more freshness, get more life, and bringing in, a new song there. But then, of course, you have, coming into the church, being a musician all my life, seeing all these Christians singing some of these contemporary Christian music songs, for me, I'm pretty, I like a lot of different music, but that is some of the, I will say, the lowest quality, and for me, the hardest music to worship to. And so I just immediately thought there must be something that we can do about this. So I'm thinking that if we can focus on building more education, more people train their ear, we can start to do some crossover things, adding some more elements in the modern music, modern worship music. So I'm starting an organization now called Composers for Beauty. We have 7 different initiatives to transform the music industry. We do concerts, retreats, we have an academy, we do competitions where we combine music together with visual arts, only living composers, living visual artists. We put them together in musical art galleries. We're going to have the next one in Oslo. So there's so much we can do. We're also developing an app called Together for Beauty Marketplace, where there's only products of beauty that people can find each other. So, for example, if you're a visual artist, you don't have to go to the, push all the buttons and everything the government want or the art gallery downtown want. You can go straight, for example, to the architect offices, and you can be a part of getting job directly from there. So there are so many opportunities that we're working on right now to kind of transforming how this is built, to go outside the very many corrupt systems, both I would say in the church when it comes to some of the Christian music industry. And I don't say corrupt as that's a hard word, but I would say that in terms of potential and in terms of the best we can do, the world has dragged it down a bit. Let me rephrase it a little bit. So let us help. That's why in the other podcast I have, SDG Music Radio, I call the first episode Empowering Contemporary Christian Music. I just want to help bring power into all the different styles. And I think bringing in these education centers, combining it with the church planting strategy, start building up more composers, which will be arrangers, which also will be the ones that take initiative to make some choirs, which again will teach the whole congregation to sing better. At least you have those 20 good voices that keep everybody on track, and on and on and on. We can really have that the church once again is the leader of the fine arts, and that will definitely glorify God and bring a new type of respect for the many conservatives right now that are so tired of, for example, the modernism or the woke movies.
Yes. And, even in terms of, I think that kind of initiative would be great for helping churches invest in their own people, the people they have in their congregations who are skilled in these ways. I think one thing I've seen in bigger churches, a lot of more historic churches, uh, I'm sure it's the same in Europe as it is in America, where a church has an organ or some grand piano, and they hire someone from outside to play who might not even be a Christian, who comes on Sundays to play music versus uh, educating people in their own church, training people, building people up to do the things that they can do to the glory of God. So it sounds like a great initiative. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Most of our listeners are people connected to the CREC in some way here in the States. Any final words to them? I am going to put the link to your podcast in the description, the link to Composers for Beauty, which is your website. And then, well, you've got two podcasts, right? You've got the SDG music podcast and the beauty and the faith podcast. So I'll put both of those down there as well so people can listen. Any final words for our people who are listening to get them excited about what you're doing and what your plans are uh, in these areas? Next
Yes,
steps, maybe.
yes. I'm preparing a presentation. I've been speaking with Yuri. He's given me a task to make a very good presentation with this. And this, I will not share too much, but the idea is to bring different CRVC churches together. And I'm really going to go more into depth about this. Because imagine this. What if you, pastor, church leader, you that are listening to this, who are part of a CRV church or are leading at this church, what if you could get a beautiful location in a central location for the same rent that you're having now that are twice as big? What if that was possible? That where you, in addition, could train up your musicians in a sustainable way, where you could have divine collisions happening with the local community. What if that was possible? And what if that was not far away? Because right now, there are enormous potential with all of these different beautiful historic buildings that are struggling right now. And are we going to let those buildings become hipster cafes? Or are we going to go in there and actually steward them? And then, just like with the gospel, take something that might be broken, that somebody just wanted to throw away, and then show through the symbolic act of actually saving that the redemptive work of Christ. For some people, showing that and coming into those communities will create a lot of good relationships, a lot of trust. So I'm saying, if that is something that sounds appealing to you, and where every one of those activities in that building will have a shared shared values when it comes to classical or conservative values, it will be a place where truth, beauty, and goodness will be valued in everything that's in there. Do you want to be a part of that? And that might be the way where we can have hundreds of locations over time of sustainable, community-centric church planting in the CREC. But somebody got to have the balls to step up. Everybody who, it will be easy in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. But we need somebody now who says, you know what, I'm willing to take a couple of arrows in the back. I want to be speaking more with this guy that has already been speaking with Yuri sometimes, and that are getting connected with some very faith-driven investors and entrepreneurs around the world who really believes in this idea. And we see that we need to be physically present. So I hope that this will inspire you, that you can learn more about this big movement happening also outside the church, in architecture, in the art world, in the music world. There's a big movement. So why shouldn't you, as the church, engage in there? Because there's people in there who can be drawn, it's like me, through the work that you do with beauty, in addition to the goodness and the truth that you're already doing.
All right. Well, thank you for being here and talking to us, Magnus. It was good to meet you and good to get to talk to you. And thank you all for listening. Again, I'm going to put the links to Magnus's podcasts in the description, and you can go give it a listen. Everybody have a great day.